She showed up to my daughter's engagement dinner in a suit that probably cost more than my truck, and the first thing she did was ask me what my retirement portfolio looked like. "Not nice to meet you, mister." "Hello, not your daughter has told me so much about you." She reached across the table, shook my hand with both of hers, and said, "So, Westmount Capital or self-directed RRSP?" I looked at my daughter. My daughter looked at her wine glass. "I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years working for the city of Calgary, roads and infrastructure. Nothing glamorous. My wife passed 8 years ago. Breast cancer, quick and cruel. After that, it was just me and my daughter in the house on Hawkwood Boulevard until she finished her degree at Mount Royal and got her own place downtown. I'm not a wealthy man. I'm a comfortable man. There's a difference, and most people understand that difference without needing it explained. This woman did not seem to be most people. Her name was Priya. She was 31. She worked in investment consulting, which I later learned meant she helped wealthy clients structure their assets in ways that minimized scrutiny. She drove a white Audi Q7 with a vanity plate. She had a laugh that filled the whole restaurant and eyes that never quite matched it. My daughter, I'll call her my daughter throughout this because that's what matters, had been seeing her for 7 months. I'd heard the name, I'd seen a few photos, but this dinner at Bow Valley Ranch was the first time I'd sat across from her in person. And within 15 minutes, I had a feeling in my chest I hadn't felt since the last time I bought a used car from a guy who kept talking about what a great deal I was getting. I didn't say anything. I smiled. I ordered the bison tenderloin. I asked Priya where she grew up. Mississauga, moved west for work, and I listened carefully to the way she described her own life. Everything was impressive. Everything had a dollar figure attached to it. Her condo in Kensington, just under 900. Her last vacation, Tuscany, business class. Her client list, mostly oil executives, some tech, a few in the film industry. My daughter was glowing. That was the hardest part. She was absolutely glowing. On the drive home, I turned the radio off and just drove. The second time I met Priya was 6 weeks later, a Sunday brunch at my daughter's apartment. Priya arrived 40 minutes late with a bottle of Veuve Clicquot and an apology that didn't sound like one. She was on the phone when she walked in and stayed on it for another 10 minutes while my daughter finished making eggs. I sat at the kitchen island and watched my daughter check the door 3 times before Priya finally arrived. That was the first thing I noted, not the lateness, the checking. Over the following months, I paid attention. I noticed that my daughter started talking about money differently. Not spending more, actually spending less. She stopped mentioning the weekend trips she used to take with her friends up to Canmore. She went quiet about the ceramics class she'd loved. Small things. The kind of things you only notice if you've known someone their whole life. Then, in October, she asked to borrow $2,000. Said her car needed work, something with the transmission on her Civic. I didn't ask questions. I transferred it the same afternoon. In January, she mentioned she'd lent Priya some money to cover a gap between client payments. I asked how much. She hesitated. $6,000, she said. I said, "Has she paid you back?" My daughter changed the subject. In March, I got a phone call that I still think about sometimes when I'm lying awake at 3 a.m. It was a Thursday evening. I was watching the Flames game. We were up 2 against the Canucks, which, if you follow hockey, you know is its own particular kind of nervous. When my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize, it said, "This is Priya's ex. I need to talk to you about your daughter. Please call me." I almost didn't. I sat there through the rest of the second period, telling myself it was nothing, probably some kind of scam or a jealous ex causing trouble. But something about the plainness of the message. No drama, no exclamation points, just "please call me," made me pick up the phone during the intermission. His name was Daniel. He'd been with Priya for 2.5 years, ending about 14 months before she met my daughter. He was a structural engineer. He lived in Edmonton now. He'd found me, he said, through my daughter's Instagram. She'd tagged me in a photo from Thanksgiving, and he'd seen my name in the comments. He'd been trying to decide whether to reach out for weeks. He told me about the renovation loan. $22,000 that Priya had convinced him to take out against his line of credit for a condo renovation. They were planning together. A condo that was solely in Priya's name. The renovation was real. His name was never on the paperwork. When they broke up, the money was simply gone. He consulted a lawyer. The lawyer told him what he already suspected. Proving it was fraud would be expensive and difficult. He let it go. He'd moved to Edmonton partly to put distance between himself and the whole thing. He said, "I'm not trying to cause drama. I just kept thinking, if someone had called me, I would have wanted to know." I thanked him. I wrote down everything he told me. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time while the third period played without the sound on. I did not call my daughter that night. I want to be clear about why. Because I've had people ask me this, and some of them haven't understood the answer. I didn't call her because I had one man's account and no documents. I knew my daughter. If I came to her with second-hand information, and she went straight to Priya, which she would have because she was in love, and that's what you do when you're in love, then Priya would have a week's head start to prepare her version of events. And I knew from that first dinner that Priya's version of events would be very, very good, so I waited. And I started paying closer attention to things I could verify myself. I asked my daughter casually over the phone how the investment she'd mentioned was going. I pretended I'd forgotten the details. She filled them in without suspecting anything. $12,000 into a private wellness fund that Priya was managing on behalf of a group of investors. The documents were being finalized. It had been 4 months, $12,000, in addition to the $6,000, in addition to the $2,000 she'd borrowed for the car, which I was now not at all sure had ever gone to the car. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an investigator. I'm a retired city worker who coached minor hockey for 11 years and grows tomatoes in his backyard in the summer. But I know how to make a few phone calls, and I know that Alberta Securities Commission has a public inquiry line. I called it. I gave them Priya's full name, her company name, Caldwell Private Wealth, which I'd looked up and found registered to an address that turned out to be a Regis shared office space on 8th Avenue, and a summary of what Daniel had told me and what my daughter had described. The person I spoke to was professional and calm. They thanked me for the information and told me they could not discuss any existing files. But they also told me, and this is the part I wrote down verbatim, if the circumstances you've described are accurate, this may not be the first time this name has come to our attention. I sat with that for a week. The moment everything changed was a Sunday in April. My daughter had invited me over for lunch. She'd made her mother's roast chicken recipe, the one with the lemon and the fresh thyme, which she only made for occasions that mattered to her. Priya was there. They had news, my daughter said. They were going to move in together. They'd found a place, a 2-bedroom condo in Inglewood, a nice building near the river. The rent was $4,200 a month, split between them. And then Priya said, "We were actually hoping you might consider co-signing the lease, just as a formality, to help with the application." I looked at my daughter. She smiled at me, bright and hopeful. And then, I will never forget this for as long as I live, her smile flickered. Just for a half second, a tiny shadow crossed her face. She looked down at her plate, and when she looked back up, the smile was there again, but it was different. Smaller, like she was apologizing for something. I excused myself to use the washroom, standing in my daughter's bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror above the sink. The same mirror she'd had since her first apartment, the one with the little crack in the lower left corner. I made a decision about how the rest of the day was going to go. I went back to the table. I poured myself more coffee. I said I'd need to think about the cosign, that it was a significant commitment, and I'd want to review the lease terms. Priya nodded graciously. My daughter looked relieved, which I also noted. Before I left, while Priya was in the kitchen dealing with her phone again, I hugged my daughter at the door. I held on a little longer than usual. She didn't pull away. I said quietly, "If there's anything you want to tell me, I'm not going anywhere." She stiffened slightly. Then she said, "I know, Dad." 2 days later, she texted me at 7 in the morning. "Can you meet me at Nellie's? The one on 9th. 8:30? I was already in my truck by 8:05. She was there when I arrived, both hands around a coffee mug, looking like she hadn't slept. I sat down across from her and waited. She talked for almost 2 hours. The car repair had been real, but she'd paid it herself. She'd asked to borrow the 2,000 because Priya had needed it urgently for something she'd described as a short-term cash flow issue with a client account. The 6,000 was the same pattern. Urgent, temporary, would be paid back within 30 days. It never was. The 12,000 for the wellness fund. There were no other investors. It was just my daughter's money. Priya had spent 3 weeks building up to asking for it. Little comments about opportunity, about how people who understood wealth moved differently, about how she wanted to include my daughter in something real. My daughter had transferred it from her TFSA, $33,000. When she added it up out loud, sitting across from me at that table with the morning light coming through the window, she went very quiet for a moment. I think it was the first time she'd added it up. I put my hand over hers. Then I told her about Daniel. I told her about the call I'd made to the ASC. I told her what I'd learned about Caldwell Private Wealth. I watched her face go through several things I don't have words for. She asked me why I hadn't told her sooner. I explained why I hadn't told her sooner. I explained why. She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded slowly, which told me she understood, even if Potiphar didn't want to. We spent the next 3 weeks doing this carefully. I connected my daughter with a lawyer, a woman I knew through a former colleague, someone who did financial fraud cases and had a no-nonsense manner that my daughter responded well to. The lawyer reviewed everything, the transfers, the text messages, the wellness fund documentation, which turned out to be a 1-page PDF with no company registration number and the logo downloaded from a free clipart site. The lawyer also made her own inquiries. Priya had 2 prior civil judgments against her in Ontario, both settled quietly, both involving money transferred by people she'd been in romantic relationships with. She'd relocated to Alberta 4 years ago. She had no registered securities license. Caldwell Private Wealth was not registered with the ASC in any capacity. My daughter did not confront Priya. The lawyer advised against it. Instead, a formal complaint was filed with the Alberta Securities Commission. The RCMP Financial Crimes Unit was also contacted. My daughter was not the only complainant. As it turned out, the ASC had 2 other files involving Priya's name, both opened within the previous 18 months. I don't know the exact details of what followed on the legal side. That's not my story to tell, and some of it is still working through the system. What I can tell you is that Priya's Audi Q7 was not parked outside my daughter's building on the Thursday morning, 3 weeks after those complaints were filed, when I drove by on my way back from the superstore, and the condo in Inglewood was never signed. My daughter lost $33,000. She was 34 years old, and she had saved that money carefully over 8 years, skipping vacations and driving an 11-year-old Civic and bringing lunch to work every day. She lost it because someone looked at her steadiness and her kindness and her love and decided those were useful things to take from. She is not okay yet, but she is getting there. We talk more now than we have since she was a teenager. Sometimes on Sunday evenings she drives out to Hawkwood and we make dinner together. Nothing fancy, whatever's in the fridge. And we sit at the same kitchen table where she did her homework in grade 11, and we just talk. About her mother sometimes, about what she wants, about how she's doing. She asked me once, a few months after everything, whether I had regretted waiting, whether I should have told her earlier, moved faster. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I told her that when you love someone, there's a version of helping that's really about making yourself feel better. Moving fast, saying I told you so before you even have the whole picture, protecting yourself from the guilt of not acting sooner. That version doesn't actually help. The version that helps is slower. It costs you more. It means sitting with what you know and waiting until you can do something that actually lands. She was quiet for a minute. Then she said, "You sound like Mom." I'll take that. There's a moment near the end of all of this that I keep coming back to. My daughter, sitting across from me at that table at Nellie's, both hands around a coffee mug, saying the number out loud for the first time. $33,000, and then going quiet. Not crying, just quiet. The way a person goes quiet when they finally let themselves understand something they've been working very hard not to understand. I've thought a lot about what made Priya effective. It wasn't charm exactly, though she had plenty of it. It was that she understood how decent people work. Decent people give the benefit of the doubt. They feel embarrassed asking follow-up questions about money. They'd rather absorb a loss than cause a scene. Priya didn't manufacture that decency in my daughter. She found it there, recognized it, and used it. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with, because the qualities that made my daughter vulnerable were the same ones that make her worth knowing. What I keep coming back to is this. The situation didn't resolve itself because I acted fast or because I was clever. It resolved because I was willing to do the slower, harder thing, gather information carefully, stay calm at that Sunday brunch when every instinct told me to say something, wait until I had enough to actually help rather than just enough to feel like I was doing something. Patience isn't the same as inaction. Sometimes patience is the only tool that works. My daughter lost $33,000. She earned it back, slowly, over about 2 years, picking up extra contracts, cutting expenses she'd already been cutting, refusing to let the loss define what came after it. I watched her do that, and I thought about her mother, who had that same quality, a kind of quiet, unshowy toughness that doesn't announce itself. You only see it in the long run. My daughter has it. She always did. She just had to find out she had it under pressure. There's a version of this story where I tell myself I protected her. I don't think that's quite right. I gave her information she needed, and I connected her with people who could help. But she made every difficult decision herself, to file the complaint, to face what had happened, to rebuild. That was all her. The most I can honestly claim is that I didn't make it worse, which, when you're dealing with someone you love and a situation that's still unfolding, is sometimes the most important thing you can offer. Daniel called me once more, about 8 months after everything. He'd heard through someone that a complaint had been filed. He just wanted to say thank you. I told him he was the one who'd started it. That phone call during the Flames game, plain and quiet, no drama. I thought you should know. That kind of honesty costs something. It would have been easier to stay out of it. He chose not to. I think about that sometimes. How much depends on people being willing to make that choice, to say the hard thing, to make the call, to show up even when it's inconvenient. Not heroics, just basic decency, done consistently, even when nobody's watching. That's what holds things together. My daughter knows that now. I think she knew it before, in theory. She knows it differently now.